Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. My name is Sheriff Elmer Hawkins, and I've been wearing this badge in Crockett County for 32 years. 32 years of domestics, bar fights, highway accidents, and the occasional meth lab explosion. You'd think, after all that time, nothing could shake me anymore. You'd be wrong. Dead wrong. What happened on that cold February morning in 2019 still wakes me up at night. Leaves me staring at the ceiling while my wife Dorothy sleeps peacefully beside me, unaware that her husband carries images in his head that would make most folks lose their appetite for a week. It started with a routine wellness check. Gladys Brennan, a retired schoolteacher who lived 3 houses down from old Myrtle Garrison on Cedar Street, called the station around 7 in the morning. She was worried because she hadn't seen Myrtle in 5 days. The newspapers were piling up on the porch. Mail was overflowing from the box, and Myrtle's cat, a fat orange tabby named Marmalade, had been crying at the back door for days. "Sheriff Elmer," Gladys said when I picked up the phone myself, "we're a small department, and I like to handle the morning calls personally. I'm real worried about Myrtle. She never goes anywhere without telling me, and she'd never leave that cat unfed. Something's not right." Myrtle Garrison was 83 years old, a widow for the past 15 years, and as regular as clockwork in her habits. Every Tuesday, she'd walk to Franklin's Market for groceries. Every Thursday, she'd have lunch at the diner with her church group. Every Sunday, she'd be in the third pew at First Baptist, wearing one of her collection of fancy hats that she'd accumulated over decades of church attendance. For her to disappear without a word was more than unusual. It was unheard of. I told Gladys I'd check on Myrtle myself. Truth was, I needed to get out of the office anyway. The budget meetings and paperwork were driving me half crazy, and a simple wellness check seemed like a good excuse to stretch my legs and do some actual police work for a change. Cedar Street is in the older part of town, where the houses were built in the 1940s and 50s. Solid brick structures with deep porches and mature oak trees that create a canopy over the road in summer. In February, though, those trees were bare, their skeletal branches reaching toward a gray sky that promised snow but never delivered. Myrtle's house was a tidy 2-story colonial with white shutters and a well-maintained garden that was dormant for the winter. Even from the street, I could see what Gladys meant. 5 days' worth of the Crockett County Tribune scattered across the porch steps, and the mailbox door hanging open, stuffed so full that envelopes had fallen onto the dead grass below. I parked my cruiser in the driveway and walked up to the front door. The first thing that hit me was the smell. After 32 years in law enforcement, you learn to recognize certain odors. This wasn't the smell of death. Not yet. It was something else, something organic and wrong, like overripe fruit mixed with ammonia. It was faint but unmistakable, seeping through the cracks around the door. I knocked hard. "Myrtle? Mrs. Garrison? It's Sheriff Elmer. Gladys asked me to check on you." No answer. Just the sound of that cat, Marmalade, crying somewhere inside the house. Not a normal cat cry either. This was desperate, almost human in its distress. I tried the doorknob, locked, walked around to the back door, my boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. The smell was stronger here, and I could see Marmalade through the glass door, pacing back and forth in the kitchen, his orange fur standing on end. The back door was unlocked. That should have been my first real warning. Myrtle Garrison was a woman who checked her locks 3 times before bed, who had a security system installed after her husband died, who kept a loaded .38 revolver in her nightstand because she didn't trust the world anymore. She would never leave her back door unlocked. I pushed it open slowly. "Mrs. Garrison, Sheriff's Department, I'm coming in to check on you." The smell hit me like a physical force. Not death, I need to be clear about that, but something almost worse. It was the smell of corruption, of things breaking down at a molecular level, of processes that shouldn't be happening in a normal household. Marmalade shot past me and out into the yard, disappearing into the neighboring hedges. The kitchen was immaculate. That was the strange thing. Everything in perfect order. Dishes washed and put away, counters wiped clean, even fresh flowers in a vase on the table. But they weren't normal flowers. I'd never seen anything like them before. Tall stalks with bulbous purple blooms that seemed to pulse in the morning light filtering through the curtains. The smell was coming from them, or maybe through them, like they were conduits for something else. I covered my nose with my sleeve and moved deeper into the house. The living room was just as tidy, just as wrong. More of those purple flowers, arranged in vases on every surface. The television was on, but muted, showing a morning talk show where the hosts smiled and gestured in eerie silence. And there were photographs everywhere. Not family photos, but pictures of the flowers themselves. Hundreds of them, tacked to the walls, spread across the coffee table, stacked on the mantel. "Myrtle?" I called out again, though I was starting to think I didn't want to find her. The stairs creaked under my weight as I climbed to the second floor. The smell was overwhelming now, and I had to stop halfway up to fight back the urge to vomit. It wasn't just the odor, it was what it was doing to me. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, and I could hear something that wasn't quite sound, more like a vibration in my bones. The master bedroom door was open. Myrtle was there. She was sitting in a chair by the window, facing the backyard, still wearing her nightgown. At first, I thought she was dead. She was so still, so pale. But as I got closer, I could see she was breathing, barely, but breathing. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing, and her hands were folded in her lap, clutching more of those purple flowers. "Mrs. Garrison? Myrtle, can you hear me?" No response. I reached out to touch her shoulder, to shake her gently, and that's when I saw what was really happening. The flowers in her hands weren't separate from her anymore. They were growing into her, or maybe out of her, I couldn't tell which. Thin, purple roots had wound themselves around her fingers, disappearing into her skin. Similar roots emerged from her arms, her neck, even from behind her ears, all of them sprouting those same pulsing blooms. I stumbled backward, my hand going to my radio. "Dispatch, this is Sheriff Elmer. I need EMS at 4147 Cedar Street immediately. And I need backup." "Copy that, Sheriff. What's the nature of the emergency?" How could I explain what I was seeing? How could I tell them that Myrtle Garrison was being consumed by something that looked like a plant but felt like something much worse? Just get here fast, and tell them to bring hazmat gear. I forced myself to look at Myrtle again. Her lips were moving now, just barely, like she was trying to speak. I leaned closer, fighting every instinct that told me to run. "They came at night," she whispered, her voice like dry leaves. "Said they needed a place to grow, said I was perfect, old, alone. No one would notice for days. Who came, Myrtle? Who did this to you?" "The gardeners. They tend their crop. Every few days they come to check, to harvest." "Harvest what?" She turned her head toward me then, and I saw that her eyes weren't empty at all. They were full of something, teeming with it. Tiny purple specks that moved like living things, swirling in patterns that made my head hurt to follow. "Us," she said. "They harvest us. I heard footsteps downstairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps that didn't sound like EMS or backup. They sounded like someone who belonged here, someone with a key. "They're here," Myrtle whispered. "The gardeners." I drew my service weapon and moved to the bedroom door, peering down the stairs. Two figures were standing in the living room, a man and a woman, both wearing what looked like gardening clothes, complete with rubber gloves and small pruning shears. They were examining the purple flowers, touching them gently, almost lovingly. "Sheriff's Department," I called out. "Put your hands where I can see them." They looked up at me with identical expressions of mild surprise, like I was an unexpected but not particularly concerning development. The woman spoke first. "Sheriff Elmer Hawkins, we weren't expecting you for another 2 days." The fact that she knew my name sent ice through my veins. "How do you know who I am?" "We know everyone in town, Sheriff. We've been here for months preparing the soil, selecting the right specimens. Myrtle was one of our best. So isolated, so perfect for cultivation. You're under arrest for whatever the hell this is. Assault, kidnapping, I don't even know what to call it." The man laughed, a sound like wind through dead branches. "You can't arrest us, Sheriff. We're not really here. Not in any way that matters to your laws." I kept my weapon trained on them as I descended the stairs. "You look pretty solid to me." "Do we?" the woman asked. And then something happened that my mind still struggles to process. They didn't disappear or fade. They simply weren't. 1 second they were there, the next they weren't, with no transition between the two states. The only evidence they'd been there at all was a scatter of purple petals on the carpet. I searched the house, every room, every closet, even the basement and attic. No sign of them. But I found other things. In the spare bedroom, I found what looked like cultivation equipment. Grow lights, feeding tubes, and containers filled with that same purple substance I'd seen in Myrtle's eyes. In the basement, I found records, detailed notes about the town's elderly population, their health conditions, their social connections or lack thereof. Myrtle wasn't the only name on the list. There were dozens of others, all marked with different colored indicators. Some green, labeled seeded, some yellow, labeled germinating, and some red, labeled harvested. Agnes Coleman, harvested. Walter Price, harvested. Betty Morrison, harvested. All names I recognized. All elderly residents who had died in the past year. All of natural causes according to the death certificates. All found days after their deaths because they lived alone and had few visitors. By the time EMS arrived, I was standing on the front porch, trying to breathe clean air and make sense of what I'd discovered. The paramedics went in with their equipment, but they came out fast, their faces pale above their masks. "Sheriff, what the hell is that in there?" one of them asked. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to get her to a hospital, and we need to do it carefully." They managed to extract Myrtle from the chair, though it took careful work to separate her from the root system that had invaded her body. She survived, if you can call it that. The doctors at County General managed to remove most of the foreign matter, but Myrtle never spoke again. She just sat in her hospital bed staring at nothing, her lips moving occasionally as if she was counting something only she could see. I spent the next 3 weeks investigating, following up on every name on that list. The ones marked seeded, I found in various stages of infection, I guess you'd call it. Some just had the flowers in their homes. Others were further along, showing the early stages of root infiltration. We got them all into quarantine, though the CDC officials who eventually took over the case couldn't explain what they were dealing with. The substance defied classification. Organic but not quite plant. Alive but not quite animal. Something in between, or maybe something else entirely. The gardeners were never found. The house-to-house search turned up nothing. The state police brought in dogs, helicopters, even thermal imaging equipment. Nothing. It was like they'd never existed at all, except for the evidence of their work, the infected elderly, the purple flowers that withered and died within hours of being removed from their hosts, and those horrible cultivation notes. The most disturbing thing, the pattern suggested they'd been doing this for years, all across the country. Small towns, elderly victims, people who wouldn't be missed immediately. Crockett County was just their latest growing ground. We kept it out of the papers, of course. Mass panic wouldn't have helped anyone, and the CDC convinced us that containment was more important than transparency. The official story was a severe mold infection in several homes, traced to contaminated insulation. The elderly victims were treated for environmental exposure, and most recovered, at least physically. Psychologically, that's another story. But here's what keeps me up at night. According to those notes, Crockett County was just one location. There were references to other towns, other states, other gardens that had been successfully cultivated. And there was a date circled in red on what looked like a calendar, March 15th, 2020. Next to it, written in that same careful handwriting, First harvest complete. Begin phase 2. That date passed 2 years ago. Nothing happened, at least nothing that made the news. But sometimes I wonder if we just don't know what to look for. Sometimes I drive through town and notice how many elderly people have those strange vacant expressions. Sometimes I see flowers in windows that don't look quite right, colors that shouldn't exist in nature. Sometimes I get calls about wellness checks and my blood runs cold. Gladys Brennan, the neighbor who first called about Myrtle, moved to Florida 6 months after the incident. She said she couldn't stand living on Cedar Street anymore, couldn't stop thinking about what had almost happened to her friend. But before she left, she told me something that I've never been able to forget. "Sheriff Elmer," she said, "I keep having these dreams. Dreams where I'm in my garden, planting seeds. Only they're not regular seeds. They're something else, something that whispers to me while I work. And in the dreams, I'm happy about it. I'm proud of what I'm growing. When I wake up, my hands are dirty, and there are seed packets in my garbage that I don't remember buying." I told her it was just stress, just her mind processing the trauma. But we both knew I was lying. We both knew that something had been planted in our town, something that might still be growing, waiting for the right conditions to bloom again. I'm retiring next month. 33 years is enough for any man, and Dorothy wants to move closer to our grandkids in Arizona. Part of me feels guilty, like I'm abandoning my post. But another part, the part that remembers the look in Myrtle's infected eyes and the sound of those gardeners' voices, is relieved. Let someone else stand watch. Let someone else check on the elderly when they don't answer their doors. Let someone else discover what's growing in the dark corners of empty houses, tended by gardeners who aren't really there. But I'm leaving my notes, all of them, filed properly in the department records. Because someday, someone's going to need them. Someday those gardeners are going to come back for their harvest, and when they do, I hope to God that whoever's wearing this badge is ready for what they're going to find. Myrtle Garrison died 6 months after we found her, officially from complications of pneumonia. But I was there at the end, and I saw what really killed her. Just before she passed, she gripped my hand with surprising strength and pulled me close. "They're still here," she whispered. "In the soil, in the water, in us. Growing, always growing." Then she smiled, and for just a moment, I swear I saw purple petals fall from her lips. I had her cremated, despite her family's wishes for a burial. I couldn't stand the thought of putting her in the ground, of giving those things another chance to grow. The funeral director thought I was being paranoid, but he didn't see what I saw, He didn't know what I know, because here's the truth that I've never told anyone. Not even Dorothy. 3 days after we found Myrtle, I discovered a purple flower growing in my own backyard. Just one. Small and perfect. Its petals pulsing in the morning sun. I burned it, doused the ground with gasoline, and lit it on fire. The neighbors complained about the smell, but I didn't care. I check that spot every morning now. Every single morning I go out there with my coffee and inspect the burned patch of earth. So far, nothing has grown back. So far. But sometimes, late at night, I hear footsteps in my garden. Sometimes I see shapes moving between the houses on Cedar Street. Tall figures carrying what look like watering cans. Sometimes I find seeds on my doorstep. Purple-black things that seem to move on their own, trying to burrow into the wooden boards of my porch. I sweep them up and burn them, just like I burn any strange flowers I find, any unusual plants that appear overnight. Dorothy thinks I've become obsessed with gardening, always out there with my tools and my bottles of herbicide. She doesn't understand that I'm not gardening. I'm standing guard, because they're still out there, the gardeners, still tending their crop, still selecting their specimens, still preparing for a harvest that I pray never comes. So if you're ever doing a wellness check and you smell something wrong, something that makes your bones ache and your vision blur, don't go in alone. Don't touch the flowers, no matter how beautiful they look. And whatever you do, don't let them get into your skin. Because once they're in, they never really leave. They just grow, slowly and patiently, until there's nothing left of you but the garden they've planted in your flesh. My name is Sheriff Virgil Hutchinson, and I've been protecting the people of Millstone County for 28 years. 28 years of serving warrants, investigating break-ins, and trying to keep the peace in a town where everyone knows everyone else's business. But what I found in Agnes Weatherby's basement on that humid July afternoon in 2018 made me question everything I thought I knew about the quiet town I'd sworn to protect. It was supposed to be a simple inspection. Agnes, a 91-year-old widow, had finally decided to sell her house and move into an assisted living facility. Her arthritis had gotten so bad she could barely make it up and down the stairs anymore, and her daughter lived 3 states away. The house, a Victorian mansion built in 1892, had been in her family for 4 generations. Now it was going on the market, and Bertha Crankshaw, the town's most aggressive real estate agent, had requested a standard inspection before the listing. "Sheriff Virgil," Bertha had said when she called me that morning, her voice crackling through my office phone like she was speaking through tissue paper. "I need you to come out to the old Weatherby place this afternoon. Agnes wants a law enforcement inspection certificate before we list it. You know how these old houses can be. Squatters, vandalism in the outbuildings, that sort of thing." I'd agreed, mostly because Agnes Weatherby had taught me in 3rd grade, and I had a soft spot for the old woman. She'd been the one who'd encouraged me to go into law enforcement, telling me I had the kind of steady presence that makes people feel safe. 45 years later, I still remembered those words. The Weatherby mansion sat on the edge of town, where Main Street petered out into farmland. It was a massive thing, 3 stories of weathered brick and gingerbread trim, with a wraparound porch and more rooms than any single family needed. Agnes had lived there alone since her husband died in 1995, rattling around in all that space like a marble in a shoebox. I pulled up the gravel driveway at about 2 in the afternoon. The July heat was oppressive, the kind that makes the air shimmer and turns every breath into work. Bertha's cherry-red Cadillac was already there, parked at an angle like she owned the place. Agnes's ancient Ford was nowhere to be seen. Her daughter had probably already taken it. Bertha met me at the front door, clipboard in hand, wearing a pantsuit that looked like it could withstand a nuclear blast. She was 73 years old, but attacked real estate with the energy of someone half her age. "Sheriff, thank goodness you're here," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "Agnes gave me the keys and asked me to handle everything. She's already at Sunset Manor, doesn't want to deal with the memories, you understand. I need you to check the whole property, house, barn, storm cellar, everything. Make sure there's nothing that would scare off buyers. Where do you want me to start?" "Basement," she said immediately. Agnes mentioned she hasn't been down there in years. Her husband used to use it as a workshop, but after he died she just locked it up. Probably full of old tools and junk, but we need to know what we're dealing with. She handed me a ring of keys that looked like they belonged in a museum. Some were old-fashioned skeleton keys, others were modern brass, and a few were so rusted I doubted they'd work at all. "The basement key should be the big iron one," Bertha said. "At least, that's what Agnes told me." She wasn't entirely sure, said her memory isn't what it used to be. The basement door was in the kitchen, painted over so many times that the details of the wood grain had been lost in layers of white paint. It took 3 tries to find the right key, and when I finally got it open, the hinges screamed like they were being tortured. A wave of cold air rushed up from below, carrying with it the smell of decades, dust, old wood, and something else, something chemical and sharp that made my nose twitch. The stairs were narrow and steep, each step groaning under my weight. There was a light switch at the top, but when I flipped it, nothing happened. Of course, I pulled out my flashlight and started down, the beam cutting through the darkness like a knife through black butter. The basement was exactly what you'd expect. Stone walls sweating with moisture, exposed beams overhead fuzzy with cobwebs, and the accumulated detritus of a century of living. There were workbenches along one wall, covered in tools that had rusted into abstract sculptures. Shelves full of mason jars containing mysterious liquids that had long since separated into disturbing layers. A collection of furniture covered in dust sheets that looked like ghosts in the flashlight beam. But it was big, much bigger than I'd expected. The basement seemed to extend beyond the footprint of the house, stretching back into darkness that my flashlight couldn't quite penetrate. As I moved deeper into the space, I realized there were rooms back here. Actual rooms with doors and everything. This wasn't just a basement. It was almost like a separate living area. The first room I checked was clearly the workshop Bertha had mentioned. Tools hung on pegboards, their outlines traced in pencil on the wood behind them. A lathe sat in the corner, covered in a thick layer of sawdust that had cemented itself into a solid cake. Normal stuff. The kind of workshop any handyman would have had in the 1980s. The second room was storage. Christmas decorations, old clothes in mothballed wardrobes, boxes of photographs and documents. I made a mental note to tell Bertha that Agnes might want to go through some of this before the sale. It was the third room that changed everything. The door was different from the others. Newer, for one thing, steel, with a modern deadbolt that had been installed maybe 10 years ago, judging by the lack of rust. And there was a smell coming from under the door, that chemical smell I'd noticed earlier, but stronger. It reminded me of a hospital, but not quite. More like a veterinary clinic, maybe, or a medical lab. I tried every key on the ring, but none of them fit the lock. I was about to give up and go ask Bertha if she had any other keys when I noticed something. The door frame had been damaged near the lock, like someone had tried to pry it open. The wood was splintered, and there were tool marks in the metal of the door itself. Someone had wanted into this room badly enough to try to break in. Or maybe they'd wanted out. I put my shoulder against the door and pushed. It didn't budge at first, but I felt something give. I pushed harder and heard a crack. The deadbolt was pulling away from the damaged frame. One more solid shove and the door swung open, the lock mechanism tearing free from the splintered wood. The smell hit me like a physical force. Chemical preservatives, formaldehyde, and underneath it all, the sweet, sick smell of decay. I covered my nose with my shirt and swept the room with my flashlight. It was a laboratory, a fully equipped medical laboratory hidden in the basement of a 91-year-old retired schoolteacher's house. Stainless steel tables lined the walls. Glass-fronted cabinets held bottles of chemicals, surgical instruments, and things floating in jars that I didn't want to look at too closely. There was a refrigeration unit humming in the corner, its motor the only sound in the oppressive silence. And in the center of the room was an examination table, complete with leather restraints and dark stains that could have been rust or could have been something else entirely. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the wall of photographs. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all carefully mounted and labeled. They showed people, men, women, children, in various states of what I can only describe as medical distress. Some were clearly unconscious. Others were awake but restrained. All of them had a look of profound wrongness about them, like something fundamental had been altered. I moved closer, my flashlight beam shaking slightly. The labels were dates and names. Some I recognized. People from town who had died or disappeared over the years. Harold Finch, who'd supposedly moved to Florida in 2003. Mary Patterson, who died of a stroke in 2007. Timothy, the exchange student who'd gone missing in 2010 and was never found. They were all here, documented in horrifying clinical detail. I pulled out my phone to call for backup, but there was no signal in the basement. I'd have to go upstairs. But as I turned to leave, my flashlight caught something else. A filing cabinet in the corner, its drawers labeled with years. The most recent was 2017, last year. I opened it. Inside were medical records, detailed notes written in precise handwriting. The name at the top of each file made my blood run cold. Dr. Marcus Weatherby, Agnes's husband. The man who'd supposedly died of a heart attack in 1985. But these files were dated well after his death. The most recent was from just 6 months ago. I picked up one of the files at random. It described, in clinical detail, a procedure performed on someone named Jennifer Walsh. I knew Jennifer. She worked at the grocery store. I'd seen her just last week. According to this file, she'd been subjected to something called cognitive restructuring in this very room 3 months ago. But she seemed perfectly normal when I talked to her. Perfectly. That's when I heard the footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate footsteps crossing the kitchen floor. Not Bertha's quick, efficient stride. These were heavier, more measured. They stopped at the basement door. "Sheriff Hutchinson?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "I know you're down there. Agnes called me, told me you'd be coming by. I think we need to talk." I drew my service weapon. "This is Sheriff Hutchinson. Identify yourself and stay where you are." "My name is Dr. Marcus Weatherby," the voice said calmly. "And before you say anything, yes, I'm supposed to be dead. It's a long story, but right now, you need to listen to me very carefully. You found my laboratory, haven't you? You've seen the photographs, the files. You're probably very confused and more than a little frightened. That's understandable. But you need to know that everything I've done has been necessary. Come down here with your hands visible," I ordered, though my voice wasn't as steady as I would have liked. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Sheriff. You see, the work I've been doing here is extremely important. Vital, even. This town has been sick for a very long time, infected with something that most people can't even perceive. I've been trying to cure it, one person at a time. You've been experimenting on people, kidnapping them, torturing them, treating them," he corrected. "Every person in those photographs came to me voluntarily. They were suffering from an affliction that conventional medicine couldn't address. I helped them. Harold Finch didn't move to Florida, did he? There was a pause. Harold was a special case. The treatment didn't take properly. His body rejected the cognitive restructuring. It was unfortunate, but necessary sacrifices have been made in the name of medical progress throughout history. Where's his body? Sheriff, you're focusing on the wrong things. The important question isn't what happened to the failures. It's what happened to the successes. Haven't you noticed how peaceful our town has been lately? How little crime there is? How everyone seems so content? I thought about it, and he was right. Crime had been down for years. People did seem happier, more cooperative. I'd attributed it to good community policing, but now, what did you do to them? I fixed them. Removed the parts of their minds that caused conflict, aggression, discontent. I made them better, more suitable for communal living, more manageable. You performed lobotomies? Oh, Sheriff, such a crude term for such elegant work. What I did was far more sophisticated. I didn't destroy parts of the brain. I rewired them, reprogrammed them, created ideal citizens who are happy, productive, and utterly incapable of violence or rebellion. I started backing toward the stairs, keeping my weapon raised. You're insane. Am I? Look at the world, Sheriff. Look at all the hatred, the violence, the chaos. Now look at our town. Peaceful, harmonious, perfect. All because of my work. And Agnes, bless her heart, she understood. She helped me fake my death so I could continue my research without interference. She brought me subjects, people who were struggling, suffering, people who needed help. Agnes knew about this? Knew about it? She was my greatest supporter, my assistant, my partner in creating a better world, one person at a time. Why do you think she really moved to Sunset Manor? Not because of arthritis, Sheriff, because the work is complete. Everyone who needed treatment has received it. Our town is finally perfect. I reached the stairs and started climbing backward, not wanting to turn my back on the doorway above. You can't stop this, Sheriff, Dr. Weatherby continued. It's already done. Most of the town has been treated. They won't let you interfere. They can't. It's not in their programming anymore. I reached the kitchen and saw him for the first time. He looked exactly like the photographs I'd seen of Marcus Weatherby, except 23 years older. Tall, thin, with white hair and piercing blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was wearing a white lab coat, spotlessly clean, and his hands were clasped calmly in front of him. "Put your hands up," I ordered. He smiled sadly. "I'm afraid I can't do that either, Sheriff. You see, you're one of the few people in town who hasn't been treated yet. You, Bertha, a handful of others. We were saving you for last because you're in positions of authority. We needed you functional until the work was complete. But now what? Now it's your turn." That's when I noticed Bertha standing behind him. But something was wrong with her eyes. They were vacant, unfocused, like she was sleepwalking. "Bertha?" I said. She didn't respond, just stood there swaying slightly. "I treated her about an hour ago," Dr. Weatherby explained. "Quick procedure, very simple. She's much happier now. Aren't you, Bertha?" Bertha nodded slowly, a smile spreading across her face. But it wasn't her smile. It wasn't the sharp, predatory grin of a real estate agent who'd just made a sale. It was empty, automatic, like a reflex. "You son of a bitch," I whispered. Now, Sheriff. No need for profanity. In a few minutes, you won't even be capable of that kind of aggression. You'll be calm, peaceful, content, just like everyone else. I heard footsteps behind me. Turned to see 3 more people entering through the back door. Jennifer Walsh from the grocery store. Tom Brennan from the hardware store. Deputy Mills, my own deputy, who I'd worked with for 5 years. All of them had that same vacant look, that same automatic smile. The beauty of the treatment, Dr. Weatherby explained as they surrounded me, is that the subjects retain all their skills and knowledge. They can still do their jobs, maintain their relationships, go about their daily lives. They just can't feel anger, fear, or discontent anymore. They can't question or rebel. They're perfectly happy being exactly what they are, forever. I backed against the wall, trying to keep all of them in sight. People will notice. The state police, the FBI. Someone will figure out what you've done. Will they? The town is functioning perfectly. Crime is non-existent. Everyone is happy and productive. There are no complaints, no problems, nothing to investigate. And if investigators do come, well, we'll treat them too. One by one, until the whole world is as peaceful as Millstone County. Deputy Mills stepped forward, and I saw he was holding a syringe. "Don't fight it, Sheriff," he said in a monotone voice that sounded nothing like the man I knew. "It's better this way, you'll see." I raised my weapon. "Stay back, Mills. I don't want to hurt you." "You can't hurt him," Dr. Weatherby said. "The treatment removes the fear of death along with everything else. They'll keep coming no matter what you do. And you won't shoot them anyway. You know these people. They're your friends, your neighbors. You won't hurt them to save yourself." He was right. I couldn't shoot Mills or Jennifer or any of them. They were victims, not villains. But I couldn't let them take me either. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned and threw myself through the kitchen window. The glass shattered around me, cutting through my uniform, slicing my skin. I hit the porch hard, rolled, and came up running. Behind me, I could hear them following. Not running, but walking with that same measured pace, relentless and unhurried. I made it to my patrol car, fumbled for the keys with bloody fingers. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of the driveway, gravel flying. In my rearview mirror, I could see them standing in the yard watching me go. Dr. Weatherby was in front, and I swear he was smiling. I drove straight to the state police barracks in the next county, burst in bleeding and babbling about secret laboratories and mind control. They thought I was having a breakdown. The stress of the job, they said. PTSD, maybe. They wanted to take me to the hospital, but I refused. Insisted they send units to the Weatherby house immediately. They did, eventually. Found nothing. The basement had been cleaned out completely. No laboratory equipment, no photographs, no files. Just an empty room with some old furniture and tools. Agnes Weatherby, they reported, was confused but cooperative. She had no idea what I was talking about. Her husband had been dead for 23 years. There was no Dr. Marcus Weatherby, alive or otherwise. Bertha Crankshaw corroborated Agnes's story. Said I'd seemed agitated when I'd arrived at the house, that I'd insisted on searching the basement alone, and that I'd suddenly run out and thrown myself through the window for no apparent reason. She was concerned about my mental health. Everyone was concerned about my mental health. The state police suggested I take a leave of absence. The town council agreed. For my own good, they said, to get some help, work through whatever I was going through. They were all very understanding, very sympathetic, very calm. I knew then that it was too late. The treatment had spread further than I'd thought. Maybe to the state police, maybe beyond. There was no way to know who had been affected and who hadn't. I took the leave of absence, packed up my things and left Millstone County that same day. Drove as far as I could, ended up in a small town in Montana where nobody knew me and nobody asked questions. But I kept tabs on Millstone County. Checked the news, made phone calls, even hired a private investigator to look into things. And what I found was exactly what Dr. Weatherby had predicted. The town was perfect. Crime dropped to zero. There were no domestic disputes, no bar fights, no vandalism. The suicide rate, already low, disappeared entirely. Everyone was productive, happy, content. The town won awards for community harmony. It became a model for other small towns to follow. And it was spreading. The same pattern appeared in neighboring counties. Sudden drops in crime and conflict. People becoming more cooperative, more peaceful. Local news stories about the miracle transformation of troubled communities. Always starting with the elderly and working inward, just like in Millstone County. I tried to warn people, wrote letters to newspapers, contacted the FBI, even started a blog detailing everything I'd seen. But who would believe such a story? A sheriff who'd had a nervous breakdown claiming that a dead doctor was performing mind control experiments in a basement. It sounded insane even to me, and I'd lived through it. The blog got some attention from conspiracy theorists, but that only made things worse. Being lumped in with people who believed in lizard people and flat earth theories destroyed any credibility I might have had. Meanwhile, Millstone County thrived. Population grew as people moved there, attracted by the peaceful atmosphere and complete absence of crime. New businesses opened, property values soared. It became the kind of place everyone wanted to live. Agnes Weatherby died peacefully in her sleep 2 years after I left. The whole town attended her funeral. In the photos from the local newspaper, everyone was smiling. Those same empty, automatic smiles I'd seen in Bertha's kitchen. Dr. Marcus Weatherby was never found. Officially, he'd been dead since Nive. But sometimes, in news footage from Millstone County, I swear I see him in the background. An old man in a white coat, watching from the edges of the frame. Always smiling that sad, knowing smile. The Weatherby house was eventually sold to a young couple from California. They renovated it completely, turned it into a bed and breakfast. It's very successful, according to the reviews. Guests always comment on how peaceful it is, how they've never slept better, how they feel different after staying there. More relaxed, more content, more manageable. I still have nightmares about that basement, about the photographs on the wall and the files in the cabinet, about all those people who'd been treated, turned into hollow versions of themselves. I wonder sometimes if they're happy, truly happy, or if there's some part of them locked away, screaming behind those vacant eyes. But mostly, I have nightmares about the fact that I escaped. Because if Dr. Weatherby's plan is to treat everyone, to create a perfectly peaceful world by removing humanity's capacity for conflict and rebellion, then those of us who remain untreated are the anomalies. We're the problems that need to be solved, the infections that need to be cured, and they're still out there, looking for us. Every time I meet someone new, I look for signs. That vacant stare, that automatic smile, that unnatural calm. I've gotten good at spotting them, the treated ones. They're everywhere now, scattered across the country like seeds waiting to bloom. Waiting for the signal to begin the next phase. I don't know what that phase is. Mass treatment? Forced procedures? Or maybe something more subtle. Just a gradual spread, town by town, until there's nowhere left to run. All I know is that I can't go back to Millstone County. Can't go anywhere near it. Because I've received letters, forwarded through various channels, all containing the same message. Your treatment room is ready whenever you are. M.W. He's waiting for me. They're all waiting. Patient and calm and absolutely certain that eventually I'll come home. That I'll accept the treatment. That I'll become like them. Maybe they're right. Maybe it is better their way. No more crime, no more violence, no more suffering. Just peace and contentment and an end to all conflict. Would that really be so bad? These are the thoughts that terrify me most, because I can feel the appeal of it, the temptation to just give in, to stop fighting and accept the treatment, to become peaceful and happy and manageable. But then I remember the photographs on that wall, the people who'd been failures, the ones whose bodies had rejected the treatment. Harold Finch, who didn't move to Florida. Mary Patterson, who didn't die of a stroke. Timothy, who didn't simply go missing. I wonder where their bodies are. I wonder if Agnes's garden was as well fertilized as people always said it was. And I wonder how many others there were, people whose names I didn't recognize, people who'd been erased from memory as thoroughly as they'd been erased from life. That's why I'm writing this down, getting it all on record. Because someone needs to know. Someone needs to be warned. The peaceful towns, the harmonious communities, the places where crime simply doesn't exist anymore, they're not miracles. They're symptoms. The treatment is spreading. The world is being cured of its humanity, one person at a time. And once you've been treated, there's no going back. You'll be happy about it. You'll be grateful. You'll wonder why you ever resisted in the first place. But you won't be you anymore. You'll be what Dr. Marcus Weatherby wants you to be. What Agnes Weatherby helped him make you. What the town of Millstone County has already become. Perfect, peaceful, empty. So if you're reading this, be careful. Watch for the signs. Don't trust the places that seem too good to be true. And whatever you do, if you find yourself in a basement that smells of chemicals and decay, if you see photographs on walls and files in cabinets, if you hear someone talking about treatment and cognitive restructuring. My name is Sheriff Rufus Carpenter, and after 34 years of wearing this badge in Harrow County, I thought I'd seen every kind of family dispute imaginable. Brothers fighting over fence lines, sisters battling over Mama's jewelry, cousins ready to kill each other over who gets Grandpa's truck. But what happened with the Harrington family in the spring of 2020, that wasn't just about money or property. That was about something much older, much darker, and it nearly cost me everything. The call came in on a Tuesday morning in late March. I was at my desk working through a stack of paperwork that never seemed to get smaller, when my secretary, Betty, knocked on my door. Sheriff Rufus, we've got a situation developing at the old Harrington estate. Multiple calls about a disturbance. The Harrington estate. 40 acres of prime farmland with a mansion that dated back to the 1850s, back when this part of Texas was still frontier territory. Old Man Harrington had died 2 weeks prior. Natural causes, the coroner said, though at 97 years old, everything's natural causes. He'd outlived 3 wives and most of his children, leaving behind a tangled mess of potential heirs and a will that nobody could find. What kind of disturbance? I asked, already reaching for my hat. Family members arguing, sounds like it might get physical. The caller said something about Opal Harrington threatening people with a shotgun. Opal was the old man's daughter from his second marriage. A woman in her 60s who had the temperament of a rattlesnake and about as much charm. I'd dealt with her before, usually when she was accusing someone of stealing from her or trespassing on what she considered her property. Anyone hurt? Not yet, but the caller sounded pretty shaken up. Said there's about 15 family members there and they're all fighting over who gets to search the house. I sighed and stood up. Better get over there before someone does something stupid. Tell Deputy Martinez to meet me there. The drive to the Harrington estate took me through the older part of the county, where the buildings still showed their age and the roads remembered when they were cattle trails. The estate itself sat on a hill overlooking Willow Creek, surrounded by ancient oak trees that had probably been there when the Comanche still rode these plains. As I pulled up the long gravel driveway, I could see the problem immediately. There were at least a dozen vehicles parked haphazardly around the circular drive. Pickup trucks, SUVs, even a Mercedes that looked completely out of place in rural Texas. People were scattered across the front lawn, some in small groups, others standing alone, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. I spotted Opal immediately. She was standing on the front porch, and sure enough, she had her daddy's old double-barrel shotgun cradled in her arms. Her gray hair was wild, like she'd been running her hands through it, and her face was flushed with anger. "Now, Opal," I called out as I got out of my patrol car, keeping my voice calm and steady. "Why don't you put that gun down before somebody gets hurt?" "Sheriff Rufus," she shouted back. "Thank God you're here. These vultures are trying to ransack Daddy's house. They're not even family. Half of them are strangers who claim they're related somehow." A younger man stepped forward from the crowd. "We have just as much right to be here as you do, Aunt Opal. Grandfather left things to all of us, not just you." This was Horace Harrington, the old man's grandson from his first marriage. I knew Horace. He ran a successful law firm in Dallas and only came back to Harrow County when there was money involved. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month, and his expression was one of barely controlled frustration. "Horace," I said, nodding to him, "what's going on here?" "What's going on is that Opal has barricaded herself in the house and won't let anyone in to look for Grandfather's will. We have reason to believe she's already destroyed it because it doesn't favor her." "That's a lie!" Opal screamed. "I'm protecting Daddy's things from these grave robbers. Half of them aren't even Harringtons." I looked around at the assembled crowd. Some faces I recognized. Distant cousins, grandnephews, people who had some legitimate claim to the Harrington name. But there were others I'd never seen before, people who looked like they'd driven in from out of state for this. "All right, everybody calm down," I said, using my sheriff voice. "First things first. Opal, I need you to put the gun down. You can't threaten people with a weapon, family or not." "But Sheriff..." "No buts. Put it down, or I'll have to arrest you." Reluctantly, she leaned the shotgun against the porch railing. I walked over and picked it up, checking to make sure it wasn't loaded. It was. I unloaded it and set it aside. "Now," I continued, "has anyone actually found a will?" "That's what we're trying to determine," Horace said. "But Opal won't let us search the house. She's been living here for the past month, supposedly taking care of Grandfather. But we think she's been hiding assets." "I was taking care of him," Opal protested. "Where were all of you when he needed help? When he was sick and confused and calling out for people who've been dead for 20 years? I was here. I was the one who fed him, bathed him, sat with him through the nightmares." "Nightmares?" I asked. Opal's expression changed, becoming less angry and more frightened. The last few weeks, Daddy wasn't himself. He kept talking about the bloodline, about promises that had to be kept. He said they were coming for their due. "Who was coming?" I asked. "I don't know." He was delirious half the time, but he was terrified of something. He made me promise to burn everything in the basement, all of it. Said it was the only way to break the contract. Horace scoffed. "She's making this up to justify destroying evidence. Grandfather was of sound mind until the end." "Sound mind?" Opal laughed bitterly. "He was drawing symbols on the walls with his own blood. He was speaking in languages that don't exist. Does that sound like sound mind to you?" The crowd had gone quiet. Even Horace looked uncomfortable now. "Opal," I said carefully, "what kind of symbols?" She looked at me with haunted eyes. "I don't know. I've never seen anything like them. They're still there in his bedroom. I couldn't bring myself to clean them off. They seem wrong somehow. Like looking at them makes your eyes hurt." I made a decision. "All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go inside with Opal and take a look around." Make sure everything is secure. The rest of you are going to wait out here calmly and peacefully. If there's a will, we'll find it and handle this properly. If there isn't, then you'll need to let the courts sort it out. But nobody else goes in that house until I say so. Understood?" There was grumbling, but nobody openly objected. I think they were all a little unnerved by Opal's talk of blood and symbols. I followed Opal into the house, and immediately I understood why she was so protective. The place was a museum of Texas history. Original furnishings from the 1800s, paintings that belonged in galleries, artifacts that told the story of the Harrington family going back generations. It was worth a fortune, and I could see why the relatives were so eager to get their hands on it. "His bedroom is upstairs," Opal said, leading me up a grand staircase that creaked under our weight. The old man's bedroom was at the end of the hall, and even before Opal opened the door, I could smell it. Copper and rot, like old pennies left in water. When she finally pushed the door open, I had to stop myself from stepping back. The walls were covered in symbols, just as she'd said. But these weren't random scrawls of a dying man. They were precise, deliberate, forming patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. And they were definitely drawn in blood, dried brown now, but blood nonetheless. "When did he do this?" I asked. 3 nights before he died. I heard him moving around and came to check on him. Found him like this, using a knife to cut his palm and painting these things. He didn't even seem to feel the pain, just kept working, muttering about keeping them out, breaking the chain. I moved closer to examine the symbols. There was something familiar about them, something that tickled the back of my memory. Then it hit me. I'd seen similar marks before, years ago, when we'd found those bodies in the abandoned Turner mine. The investigators had said they were cult symbols, but they'd never identified which cult. "Opal, what did your father do for a living when he was younger?" "He was in oil, mostly. Made his fortune in the boom of the 50s. But before that," she paused. "Before that, I don't really know. He never talked about it. Neither did my mother. It was like his life started when he was 30. I was about to ask another question when I heard something from downstairs. Footsteps, multiple sets of them. "Did you lock the door behind us?" I asked. I thought I did." More footsteps, and now voices. But not the voices of the family members outside. These were different. Older, rougher, speaking in low tones I couldn't quite make out. I drew my service weapon. "Stay here. Lock the door behind me." I made my way back to the stairs, listening. The voices were coming from below, from what sounded like the basement. But how had they gotten in without us seeing them? I descended the stairs slowly, weapon at the ready. The main floor was empty, but the basement door was open, a door that had definitely been closed when we came in. The voices were clearer now, and I could make out words, though they weren't in English. It sounded like Latin, maybe, or something older. A chant of some kind. I should have called for backup. Should have waited for Deputy Martinez. But something drew me down those basement stairs, a compulsion I couldn't explain. The air grew colder with each step, and that copper smell got stronger. The basement was lit by candles, dozens of them arranged in a circle on the floor. In the center of the circle were 3 figures in dark robes, their faces hidden by hoods. They were standing over something, a book or ledger of some kind, and they were reading from it in that strange language. "Sheriff's Department," I announced, though my voice came out weaker than I intended. "What are you doing here?" One of the figures turned toward me, and I caught a glimpse of the face under the hood. It was ancient, impossibly old, with skin like parchment and eyes that were completely black. "Sheriff Rufus Carpenter," it said, and its voice was like wind through a crypt. "We are here to collect what is owed. This is private property. You're trespassing." The figure laughed, a sound that made my skin crawl. "We have been invited. The bloodline calls to us, as it has for 7 generations. The contract must be fulfilled." "What contract?" Another figure spoke, this one with a voice like grinding stone. "In 1851, Jeremiah Harrington made a bargain. Wealth and power for his family, in exchange for the 7th son of the 7th generation. That son was born 2 weeks ago, in Dallas. We have come to collect." Horace had mentioned something about his new son when he'd arrived at the estate. His 7th child. And Horace himself was Old Man Harrington's 7th grandchild. "You're talking about Horace's baby," I said. "The contract is clear. The bloodline must pay its debt. Over my dead body." The third figure, who hadn't spoken yet, raised its head. When it spoke, its voice was like a chorus of screams. "That can be arranged, Sheriff." The candles flared, casting wild shadows on the walls. The symbols on the floor began to glow with a sick red light, and I felt something pressing against my mind, trying to get in, trying to take control. I fired my weapon. 3 shots, center mass on the closest figure. The bullets passed right through it, like it was made of smoke. The figure didn't even flinch. "Your weapons are useless here," it said. "This is a matter of blood and contract, not lead and gunpowder." The pressure in my head increased, and I dropped to one knee. Images flashed through my mind. Jeremiah Harrington, young and desperate, signing his name in blood on an ancient document. Generations of Harrington men and women, growing wealthy beyond measure, never knowing the price that would eventually come due. And a baby, innocent and unaware, marked for something horrible. "Stop!" I gasped. "We cannot stop. The contract must be fulfilled, unless—" The pressure eased slightly. "Unless what?" "Unless another of the bloodline takes the child's place. A willing sacrifice to void the debt." I thought of Opal upstairs, terrified and alone. Of Horace outside, arrogant but unaware of the danger to his son. Of all the Harrington descendants scattered across the property, bickering over money, while something ancient and evil prepared to collect its due. "I'll do it," a voice said from the stairs. It was Opal. She was standing there, pale but determined, the old shotgun in her hands, though we both knew it would be useless against these things. "I'll take the baby's place," she said. "I'm of the bloodline. Daddy told me everything before he died. He tried to break the contract, tried to use those symbols to keep you out. But he was too weak, too old. I'm not." "Opal, no," I said. "It's okay, Sheriff. I've lived my life. That baby hasn't. And someone needs to end this curse on our family." The 3 figures conferred in their ancient language. Finally, the one in the center spoke. "The offer is acceptable. Opal Harrington, daughter of the 6th generation, you will come with us. The debt will be paid, and the contract dissolved. No more Harringtons will be bound by it." "Wait," I said. "Where are you taking her?" "That is not your concern, Sheriff. Your only concern should be that the child is safe, and your town is free of our presence." Opal walked down the stairs past me into the circle of candles. She looked back at me once. "Tell Horace. Tell him I wasn't crazy. Tell him to be a better father than the ones who came before. And Sheriff, burn everything in this basement, everything. Don't let anyone else find out about this. It's better if they don't know." The candles flared again, so bright I had to shield my eyes. When the light faded, the basement was empty. No figures, no candles, no Opal. Just me, standing in the dark with my useless gun and a story nobody would ever believe. I found the book they'd been reading from, along with boxes of documents dating back to the 1800s. The contract was there, written in Latin and something else, signed in what looked like blood. I read enough to understand that the Harringtons' fortune had come at a terrible price, one that had finally been paid. I did what Opal asked. I burned it all. Every document, every book, every trace of the bargain that had cursed the 7 generations of Harringtons. I told Horace and the others that Opal had left, that she'd decided she didn't want any part of the inheritance. They didn't believe me at first, but when weeks passed with no sign of her, they eventually accepted it. The will was never found. The courts divided the estate among the surviving relatives. Horace got the lion's share, being the eldest grandchild. He sold the house immediately, said it gave him the creeps. It's a bed and breakfast now, run by a nice couple from Austin who don't know its history. But I know. I know that somewhere, in some place between here and nowhere, Opal Harrington is paying a debt that should never have existed. I know that a baby in Dallas is free from a curse he'll never know about, and I know that some secrets are better buried than revealed. The nightmares started about a month after Opal disappeared. Dreams where I'm in that basement again, but this time I'm the one in the circle of candles. The 3 figures are there, waiting, and they tell me that the contract wasn't completely dissolved, that there's a codicil, a clause that even Opal didn't know about. They tell me that anyone who witnesses the collection becomes part of the contract. That my bloodline is now bound to theirs, just as the Harringtons were. That in 7 generations, they'll come for my descendant. I wake up in a cold sweat every time, and I check on my children, my grandchildren. They're fine, of course. It's just a dream, just my mind processing the trauma of what I saw. But sometimes, when I'm working late at the office, I find symbols drawn in the margins of my paperwork. Symbols I don't remember making. Symbols that look just like the ones Old Man Harrington painted on his walls in blood. I've started researching, quietly, carefully, looking for ways to break contracts with things that shouldn't exist. I've found references to similar bargains in old newspaper archives, always ending the same way: a disappearance, a family fortune that mysteriously dries up, and stories that nobody believes. There's a professor at the university in Austin who studies this kind of thing. Folklore, he calls it, but I can tell he knows it's more than that. I'm thinking of reaching out to him, telling him what I saw. Maybe he'll have answers. Maybe he'll know how to break a contract that hasn't even been made yet. Because if those dreams are more than just dreams, if what the figures told me is true, then my family is in danger. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. And I'll be damned if I let what happened to the Harringtons happen to my bloodline. In the meantime, I keep working, keep protecting the people of Harrow County. But I also keep watching, keep preparing. I've taught my children to be suspicious of easy fortune, to question deals that seem too good to be true. I've hidden copies of my research in places they'll find when I'm gone, along with instructions on what to do if strangers come calling with contracts to sign. And late at night, when the office is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I sometimes feel them watching. Not the 3 figures. They kept their bargain and haven't returned. But something else. Something that's interested in the fact that I know about them, that I've seen beyond the veil. Last week, I found a package on my desk with no return address. Inside was a single page, written in that same ancient language I'd heard in the basement. I had it translated by the professor in Austin, being careful not to tell him where it came from. It was an invitation, an offer to join them, to become one of the contract makers instead of the contracted. All I have to do is bring them someone of pure bloodline, someone whose family has never made a bargain. I burned the invitation, just like I burned everything in the Harrington basement. But more packages keep arriving, each one with a slightly different offer, each one more tempting than the last. They promise knowledge, power, the ability to protect my family from all threats, not just supernatural ones. They promise that my bloodline will never be prey, only predator. I haven't accepted. I won't accept. But the offers keep coming, and each time I refuse, I feel them getting impatient. Like my refusal itself is becoming interesting to them, a challenge they're eager to overcome. Horace came to see me last month. His son, the baby that Opal saved, is thriving. Walking now, starting to talk. Horace doesn't know what his aunt did for him, what she sacrificed. He thinks she was just a crazy old woman who couldn't handle the family pressure. But he mentioned something that chilled me to the bone. The baby's first word wasn't mama or dada, it was Opal. And sometimes, late at night, Horace finds the child standing in his crib, staring at empty air and laughing, like someone invisible is playing with him. I told Horace it was normal, that children have imaginary friends. But I don't think that's what it is. I think Opal is still watching over the child she saved, even from wherever they took her. I think she's making sure the bargain is kept, that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. The Harrington estate is thriving as a bed and breakfast, but the owners have mentioned strange things. Guests report dreams of an old woman who tells them to leave before midnight. Sounds from the basement that investigation can't explain. And once, just once, someone claimed they saw 3 figures in dark robes standing in the garden, looking up at the house like they were checking on something. The owners think it's great for business, a haunted bed and breakfast in rural Texas. They've even started advertising it that way. But I know better. I know those figures are making sure the contract is truly dissolved, that no new bargains are being made in that house where so much was promised and so much was lost. I'm writing all of this down because someone needs to know. Someone needs to understand that there are things in this world that operate by different rules, ancient rules that predate our laws and our logic. Things that make bargains and keep them, no matter the cost. If you're reading this, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you promise. And if someone offers you everything you've ever wanted in exchange for something that seems small, remember the Harringtons. Remember Opal. Remember that every contract has a price, and sometimes that price isn't paid by you, but by your children's children's children. I'm still sheriff of Harrow County. I still protect and serve, but now I know that some of the things I'm protecting people from aren't human, aren't bound by our understanding of reality. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving the back roads and I see lights in the sky that don't belong to any plane or star, I wonder if they're watching me, waiting to see if I'll take their offer, waiting to see if I'll become like them. I won't. I'll die first. But the packages keep coming, and the offers keep getting better. How long before they stop asking and start demanding? How long before my refusal becomes an insult they can't ignore? I don't know, but I'm ready for them. I've got salt from consecrated ground, iron that's never known forge, and words and languages that hurt to speak. It might not be enough, but it's something. Because if they come for me, if they try to force me into a contract, I want them to know that Sheriff Rufus Carpenter doesn't go down without a fight. And if I can't win, if they're too strong, then at least I'll make enough noise that others will know what happened. My name is Sheriff Chester Rawlings, and I've been keeping the peace in Bracken County for 36 years. 36 years of drunk drivers, domestic disputes, and the occasional meth lab explosion. I've pulled bodies from car wrecks, talked jumpers off bridges, and once had to shoot a rabid coyote that was terrorizing an elementary school. But nothing in those 36 years prepared me for what I found at the old Pendleton farm in October of 2021. What I discovered there still wakes me up at 3 a.m, gasping for air, like I'm drowning in my own bed. The Pendleton place had been abandoned since 1994, when old Edna Pendleton died at the age of 93. She'd been the last of her line, never married, no children, no living relatives that anyone could find. The county had seized the property for back taxes years ago, but nobody wanted to buy it. It was too far from town, too run down, and there were stories about the place that made even the bravest developers think twice. The call came in on October 15th, a Friday. I remember because I was planning to take the weekend off, go fishing with my grandson Tommy. But Homer Grayson, who owned the property adjacent to the Pendleton farm, called the station around noon. "Sheriff Chester," he said when I picked up, "I think you need to come out here and take a look at the old Pendleton place. Something's not right." Homer was 78 years old, a Korean War veteran who'd farmed the same land his whole life. He wasn't the type to call the law unless something was seriously wrong. "What's going on, Homer?" "Well, I was out checking my fence line this morning, the one that borders the Pendleton property, and I saw lights in the farmhouse last night. That place has been empty for near 30 years. No electricity, no nothing. But there were lights moving around inside, like someone with lanterns or flashlights." "Could be squatters," I said, "or kids using it as a party spot." That's what I thought. "But Sheriff, I also heard sounds, machinery, like farming equipment, but different, old sounding. And there's smoke coming from the chimney right now. Someone's living there." I sighed and looked at the pile of paperwork on my desk. It could wait. "All right, Homer, I'll drive out and take a look. Probably just some homeless folks looking for shelter." "I hope that's all it is," Homer said, and there was something in his voice that made me pause. "Sheriff, you remember the stories about that place? About what Edna used to do out there?" I did remember. Edna Pendleton had been what folks politely called eccentric. She'd lived alone on that farm for 70 years, rarely coming to town, growing her own food, making her own clothes. Some people said she was a witch. Others said she was just a hermit who wanted to be left alone. But there were whispers about things people had seen on her property. Strange lights in the fields at night, animals that didn't look quite right, and sounds that didn't belong in rural Texas. I remember Homer, but Edna's been dead for 27 years. Whatever she was doing, it died with her. "Maybe," Homer said, "or maybe someone else is doing it now." The drive out to the Pendleton place took 45 minutes. The farm was located on the northern edge of Bracken County, where the land starts to rise toward the hill country. The road deteriorated from paved to gravel to dirt, and by the time I reached the property, my patrol car was covered in a fine layer of dust. The Pendleton farm sat in a valley between two hills, isolated from the rest of the world. The main house was a 2-story farmhouse that had probably been white once, but was now gray with age and neglect. The roof was partially collapsed. Windows were broken, and vines had taken over most of the north wall. Behind the house were several outbuildings: a barn, a chicken coop, what looked like a smokehouse, and a storm cellar built into the hillside. But Homer was right. There was smoke coming from the chimney, a thin, steady stream that meant someone had a fire going inside. I parked at the end of the driveway, which was so overgrown with weeds that I could barely see where it had been. As I got out of the car, I noticed something else: tire tracks in the grass, fresh ones, leading around to the back of the house. Someone had driven here recently, probably within the last day or two. I walked up to the front door, my hand resting on my service weapon. The porch boards creaked under my weight, and I could see gaps where some had rotted through completely. The front door was hanging open, barely attached to its hinges. "Sheriff's Department," I called out. "Anyone in there?" No response, but I could hear something inside, a rhythmic sound, like someone working, chopping maybe or hammering. I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The smell hit me immediately. Decay, mold, and something else. Something organic and wrong, like meat that had been left out too long but wasn't quite rotting. It reminded me of the smell in a slaughterhouse, but sweeter, more cloying. The interior of the house was a disaster. Wallpaper hung in strips from the walls, the ceiling was water-stained and sagging, and the floor was covered in debris. But there was a clear path through the mess, swept clean, leading toward the back of the house. And there were footprints in the dust, dozens of them, all different sizes, like multiple people had been walking through here. The sound was coming from the kitchen. I made my way through the house, stepping carefully over broken floorboards and piles of old newspapers. The kitchen door was closed, but I could see light underneath it. Not electric light, but the flickering of fire. I pushed open the door. The kitchen had been cleaned, not just cleaned, restored. The old wood stove was burning, pots were bubbling on top of it, and the table was set for dinner. 4 places, with actual china and silverware that looked like it had been polished recently. The smell was stronger here, coming from whatever was cooking in those pots. But the kitchen was empty. No one was there. The chopping sound had stopped the moment I opened the door. I walked over to the stove and looked in one of the pots. I immediately wished I hadn't. It was some kind of stew, but the meat floating in it didn't look like any animal I recognized. It was pale, almost translucent, with a texture that reminded me of fish but wasn't quite right. And there were things in it that looked like organs, but too small to be from cattle or pigs. "You shouldn't be here." I spun him around, my hand going to my gun. A woman was standing in the doorway, elderly, maybe in her 70s, wearing a dress that looked like it had come straight from the 1950s. Her gray hair was pinned up in a style I'd only seen in old photographs, and her face was lined but pleasant, almost grandmotherly. "Ma'am, I'm Sheriff Chester Rawlings. This property is condemned. You can't be living here." She smiled, and something about that smile made my skin crawl. "I've been living here all my life, Sheriff. This is my home." "That's impossible. This place has been abandoned since 1994. Edna Pendleton was the last person to live here, and she died 27 years ago." The woman's smile widened. "Did she? Are you sure about that, Sheriff Chester?" I looked at her more closely. There was something familiar about her face, something that tickled the back of my memory. And then it hit me. I'd seen her picture in the newspaper archives when I was researching the property before coming out. It was Edna Pendleton, or someone who looked exactly like her. "You can't be Edna," I said. "Edna would be 120 years old if she was still alive." "Age is just a number, Sheriff. Just marks on a calendar that doesn't mean much out here. Time moves different on the Pendleton farm, always has." "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification." She laughed, a sound like wind through dry leaves. "Identification? Oh, Sheriff, I haven't needed that in decades. Nobody comes here. Nobody except Homer, and he knows better than to get too close. But you're new. You don't know the rules." "What rules?" "The rules about this place. About what happens here. About why the county really leaves us alone. The county doesn't leave you alone. This property is abandoned, condemned." "Is it? Then why haven't they torn it down? Why haven't they sold it? 27 years, Sheriff, and nobody's touched this place. Don't you wonder why?" I did wonder. The county was always eager to sell seized properties to get them back on the tax rolls. But the Pendleton place had just sat here, rotting, for nearly 3 decades. "There's nothing special about this place," I said, though I was starting to doubt that. "It's just an old farm. Come with me, Sheriff. Let me show you something." She turned and walked out of the kitchen, not waiting to see if I'd follow. Against my better judgment, I did. She led me through the house to a door I hadn't noticed before. hidden behind a fallen bookshelf. It opened onto stairs leading down, not to a basement, but deeper. The walls were stone, old stone, older than the house above, older than anything should be in this part of Texas. This was here before the house, she said as we descended, before the farm, before the Spanish, before the Comanche, before anyone. It's always been here, waiting. The stairs went down further than seemed possible. The air grew colder, and that smell got stronger. Decay and sweetness, and something alien. Finally, we emerged into a cavern. Not a room, not a cellar, but a natural cave system that stretched off into darkness. But it wasn't empty. There were things growing there. Plants, I think, but unlike any plants I'd ever seen. They were pale, almost luminescent, with stalks that pulsed like veins and leaves that moved without any wind. They were planted in neat rows, like crops, stretching back as far as I could see in the dim light. "What is this?" I whispered. "The real farm," Edna said. "What we really grow here, what we've always grown here." I looked closer at the nearest plant. It had fruit of some kind, bulbous things that hung from the stalks. As I watched, one of them moved, not swayed, moved like it was breathing. "These aren't from here," I said. "These aren't normal. No, they're not. They're from somewhere else, somewhere far away. They were a gift, you might say, or maybe a curse, depends on how you look at it." "From who?" "From them." She pointed to the far end of the cavern. I followed her finger and saw them. Figures in the darkness, tall and thin, moving among the plants with the careful precision of farmers tending their crops. But they weren't human. Couldn't be human. They were too tall, too angular, and they moved wrong, like they had too many joints or their joints bent in directions that shouldn't be possible. "Jesus Christ," I breathed. "Wrong deity, Sheriff. These things are older than him, older than any god humans have named." One of the figures noticed us and began moving toward us. As it got closer, I could see it more clearly, and I wished I couldn't. It had a face, sort of, but the features were all wrong. Too many eyes, arranged in patterns that hurt to look at. A mouth that opened sideways instead of up and down. And hands, if you could call them hands, with fingers that branched and rebranched like tree roots. It spoke, and the sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once, not through the air, but directly into my mind. "The new guardian," it said, looking at me. "You have come to take her place." "No," I said, backing away. "I'm just here to check on the property. All who find this place become guardians. It is the way." Edna touched my arm. "That's how it happened to me, Sheriff. I came here as a young woman, just curious about the old farm my family had inherited, and I found them, found this. And they explained that someone has to tend the garden. Someone has to make sure the crop is harvested properly, prepared correctly, distributed carefully." "Distributed? You mean that stew? Fed to the right people at the right times. It changes them, Sheriff. Makes them better. Or worse. Depends on the person. Depends on the dosage. But it keeps the balance. Keeps things stable." "You've been drugging people?" "Medicine and poison are the same thing, Sheriff. Just depends on the dose. And what I've been doing has kept this county safe for 70 years. No murders, no serial killers, no mass shootings. Just peace. Because the wrong people get sick and leave and the right people get healthy and stay. That's insane." "Is it? Look at the statistics, Sheriff. Bracken County has the lowest crime rate in Texas, the highest life expectancy, the best health outcomes. You think that's natural?" I thought about it, and she was right. Our county was anomalous. Researchers had come to study us, to figure out why we were so peaceful, so healthy. They'd never found an answer. Now I knew why. "But you're dying," the thing in my mind said. "The guardian is old, failing. Someone must take her place or the garden dies, and if the garden dies, the balance breaks. What has been held back will be released." "What's been held back?" Edna looked at me with those ancient eyes. "Everything bad, Sheriff. Every serial killer who drove through town and suddenly decided to keep going. Every disease that should have spread but didn't. Every disaster that veered away at the last moment. It's all connected to this place, to these plants, to the things we grow in the dark." "I don't believe you. Then let me show you." She led me to another section of the cave where the plants were different. These were darker, thornier, with fruit that looked rotten even though it was still growing. And there was a map on the wall, carved into the stone, showing Bracken County and the surrounding areas. "Look," she said, pointing to marks on the map. "Every tragedy that's happened nearby but not here. The tornado that turned away in '87. The serial killer who was caught just across the county line in '92. The water contamination that affected every town but ours in 2001. All of it because of what we do here." I studied the map, and the pattern was undeniable. It was like there was a bubble of protection around Bracken County, and all the bad things just slid off it to affect other places instead. "We don't stop bad things from happening," Edna explained. "We just redirect them, push them away, make them someone else's problem. It's selfish maybe, but it keeps our people safe. And if you stop, then it all comes back, all at once. Every disaster we've avoided, every tragedy we've deflected, it all comes home to roost. The county would be destroyed within days." The thing in my mind spoke again. "Choose, new guardian. Take the burden, or watch your people suffer." I wanted to run. Every instinct told me to get out of there, call for backup, bring in the FBI, CDC, whoever would listen. But I also thought about my town, my people, my grandson Tommy. What would happen to them if this protection disappeared? "How long?" I asked. "How long would I have to do this?" "Until another finds the place," Edna said. "Could be years. Could be decades. I've been here for 70 years, Sheriff. 70 years of tending the garden, making the meals, maintaining the balance. It's not a bad life. Lonely, maybe, but purposeful. And if I say no?" The thing tilted its head in a way that shouldn't have been possible. "Then you leave, and forget. We will make you forget. But the guardian still dies, and the garden fails, and your county burns." It wasn't really a choice. "What do I have to do?" I asked. Edna smiled that terrible smile again. "First, you eat." She led me back to the kitchen, to that pot of strange stew. She ladled some into a bowl and placed it in front of me. "This will change you," she said. "Make you capable of understanding them, of working with them. You'll age slower, need less sleep, less food. You'll know things, sense things. You'll always know when danger is approaching the county, and you'll know how to redirect it." I stared at the bowl. The meat was still unidentifiable, still wrong. But I thought about Tommy, about his mother, my daughter, about everyone in Bracken County who had no idea they were being protected by something impossible. I ate. It tasted like nothing I can describe. Like colors that don't exist. Like sounds beyond hearing. It burned and froze at the same time. And as I swallowed, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The world looked different. I could see threads connecting everything, lines of causality and possibility. I could feel the thing in the cave not as an intrusion in my mind, but as a presence I could understand. "Good," Edna said. "Now you're ready to learn." She spent the next 3 days teaching me how to tend the garden, how to harvest the fruit, how to prepare it properly, how to identify who needed to eat it and who shouldn't, how to read the signs that danger was approaching, and how to perform the rituals that would push it away. The things in the cave, she called them the gardeners, had been here for millennia. They came from somewhere else, somewhere outside our understanding of space and time. They couldn't survive in our world directly, but they could grow things here. Things that affected reality in subtle ways. They needed humans to be their intermediaries, to walk between worlds. Why? I asked on the third day. Why do they care about protecting us? They don't, Edna said simply. They're farming us, Sheriff. Keeping us healthy and safe so we can keep tending their garden. We're not pets or partners. We're tools. But it's a symbiotic relationship. They get what they need. We get protection. It works. On the fourth day, she died. Simply collapsed while showing me how to prune the darker plants. One moment she was talking, the next she was on the ground, finally looking her real age. 120 years caught up with her all at once. The gardeners took her body. I don't know what they did with it, and I didn't ask. That was 3 years ago. I'm still the sheriff of Bracken County. I still investigate crimes, write tickets, keep the peace. But I also spend my nights at the Pendleton farm, tending the garden, preparing the special meals that keep our county safe. Homer knows something's different. He's seen me coming and going from the farm, but he also knows better than to ask questions. He remembers Edna, remembers the stories. He leaves me alone. The protection continues. We had a mass shooter drive through town last year, on his way to attack a school. He got mysteriously ill just as he entered the county, pulled over, and was arrested when we found the weapons in his car. A tornado formed just outside our borders last spring, then dissipated before it could do any damage. A water contamination issue affected 3 neighboring counties, but our water stayed clean. Nobody questions it. Nobody wants to look too closely at why we're so lucky. I've changed. I can feel it. I don't need much sleep anymore. Food tastes different. Regular food, I mean. It's like eating cardboard. Only the stuff from the garden satisfies me now. And I can see things others can't. Patterns in the air. Threads of connection between events. I know when someone's about to commit a crime before they do it. I know when danger is approaching from miles away. I'm not human anymore. Not fully. I'm something in between. A bridge between our world and theirs. Sometimes I think about telling someone. About calling in the authorities. Exposing the whole thing. But then I remember what Edna showed me. All those disasters that didn't happen here. All those tragedies that struck other places instead. And I think about Tommy, about to graduate high school, planning to go to college. Safe. Protected. Because of what I do in that cave. The gardeners speak to me more now. Not in words, but in images, feelings, concepts. They're teaching me things Edna never knew, showing me deeper levels of the garden. There are other caves, other farms, scattered across the world. A network of guardians, all tending their own gardens, all maintaining their own balance. We're saving the world, in a way, or destroying it. Depends on your perspective. Because the things we grow don't just redirect danger. They reshape reality. Every time someone eats the prepared fruit, they change a little. Become a little less human, a little more something else. It's subtle, happens over generations, but humanity is evolving, being cultivated. The gardeners are patient. They've been doing this for thousands of years, maybe longer. Slowly changing us, preparing us for something. I don't know what. When I ask, they show me images I can't understand, geometries that shouldn't exist, colors beyond the spectrum, concepts my mind can't grasp. but I know it's coming. Whatever they're preparing us for, it's getting closer. Last month, a new type of plant appeared in the garden, something I'd never seen before that Edna had never mentioned. The fruit is different, golden, glowing, almost singing with some kind of energy. The gardeners won't tell me what it's for, just that it's not time yet. But they tend these new plants with special care, like they're more important than all the others. I've been having dreams where the sky opens up and things pour through, not the gardeners, but something else, something they're either waiting for or hiding from. In the dreams, the only people who survive are the ones who've eaten from the garden, the ones who've been changed. The normal humans, the unchanged ones, they just dissolve, like they were never real to begin with. I wake up from these dreams certain they're not dreams at all, but visions. Prophecies, warnings, or promises. I've started preparing more meals, distributing them wider. Not just to prevent crimes or redirect disasters, but to change people. To get them ready for whatever's coming. It feels wrong, playing God like this, deciding who gets changed and who doesn't. But if the dreams are true, it's the only way to save them. My deputy, a young man named Rodriguez, has been asking questions. He's noticed patterns, inconsistencies in my schedule. He knows something's going on. I've been thinking about bringing him to the farm, showing him the truth. He's smart, capable. He could be my backup, maybe even my replacement someday. But once you know, you can't unknow. Once you've eaten from the garden, you can't go back to being fully human. It's a curse disguised as a blessing, or maybe the other way around. The gardeners are getting more active. I see them in town sometimes at the edges of vision, watching. They're not supposed to be able to leave the cave, but the boundaries are weakening. Or maybe they're getting stronger. They watch the people who've eaten from the garden with special interest, like farmers examining their crop. We're the crop. Humans. We've always been the crop. And harvest time is coming. I don't know what that means exactly, but I can feel it approaching like a storm on the horizon. The new plants are growing faster, the golden fruit getting brighter. The gardeners are excited, agitated, preparing for something. I've left instructions in my will, hidden in a safety deposit box in the next county. If something happens to me, if I disappear or die suddenly, someone needs to know about the farm, about the garden, about what's been protecting Bracken County all these years. But I've also left warnings. Don't go there unless you're prepared to take on the burden. Don't eat from the garden unless you're ready to stop being fully human. And whatever you do, don't try to destroy it, because if the garden dies, if the protection fails, it won't just be Bracken County that suffers. The network is global. Every guardian who fails, every garden that dies, weakens the whole system. And if the system collapses, if all the redirected disasters and prevented tragedies come due at once, it would be the end of everything. So I keep tending the garden, keep preparing the meals, keep the balance. Not because I want to, but because the alternative is unthinkable. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in that cave with the gardeners and the strange plants and the impossible fruit, I wonder if we're really being protected, or if we're being prepared for consumption, if we're the farmers or the farm animals. The gardeners won't answer when I ask. They just show me those impossible images again, those geometries that hurt to perceive. And sometimes, in those images, I see something that might be Earth, but changed, transformed, harvested. 3 weeks ago, Homer died. Natural causes, the coroner said. Heart failure in his sleep. But I know better. I'd been feeding him small doses for months, trying to protect him, trying to prepare him, but his body rejected it. He was too old, too set in his humanity. At his funeral, I saw his grandson, a boy named Lucas who just turned 18. Smart kid, curious, always asking questions. He reminds me of myself at that age. He mentioned that his grandfather had left him something, a key to a safety deposit box and a note that just said, "Ask Chester about the farm." Homer knew. He'd always known. And now he's passed the burden of knowledge on to his grandson. Lucas came to see me yesterday, asked about the farm. Asked why his grandfather had newspaper clippings about disappearances near the Pendleton place going back decades. Asked why Homer had written "Chester knows" on every single clipping. I could lie to him, make him forget, like the gardeners made others forget, keep him safe in his ignorance, but the golden fruit is almost ready. The gardeners are more active than ever, and I'm starting to feel my age, even with the changes the garden has made to my body. I need help. Maybe I need a replacement. So I told Lucas the truth, showed him the farm, took him down to the cave. He didn't run, didn't scream, just stood there staring at the garden, at the gardeners, at the impossible reality of it all. "My grandfather knew about this?" he asked. "He knew enough to stay away, but he also knew it was necessary. And now you want me to help you? I want you to understand, to make a choice. You can walk away, and I'll make you forget. Or you can help me protect the county. But if you choose to help, there's no going back." He's thinking about it. I gave him 3 days to decide. 3 days to live his normal life. To say goodbye to who he was if he chooses to change. The golden fruit will be ready in a week. The gardeners have started singing, not with voices, but with vibrations that make the whole cave resonate. They're calling something, or something's calling to them. I've been preparing, stockpiling the regular fruit, the kind that changes people slowly, distributing it throughout the county in small doses, in the water supply, in crop spray, and a dozen other ways. If the dreams are true, if something's coming, I want as many people protected as possible. It might be wrong, it's definitely illegal, but I'd rather have a county full of slightly changed humans than a county full of corpses. Sheriff Chester Rawlings, signing off. If you're reading this, it means something's happened to me. The farm is at the old Pendleton place, northern edge of Bracken County. The entrance to the cave is through the hidden door behind the bookshelf. The gardeners will be waiting. But before you go, ask yourself, are you ready to stop being human? Are you ready to become a guardian, a bridge between worlds? Are you ready to make the choice between saving your people and saving your soul? My name is Sheriff Clyde Hutchinson, and I've been wearing this badge in Limestone County for 31 years. 31 years of bar fights, highway accidents, and the occasional domestic dispute that gets out of hand. I've seen marriages fall apart, watched kids grow up to become criminals, and buried more colleagues than I care to count. But what started as a simple noise complaint on that humid August night in 2019 became the most horrifying case of my career. What I discovered in that ordinary suburban house still makes me check my locks 3 times before bed and avoid basements altogether. It was August 23rd, a Thursday night. The temperature was still in the high 90s even after sunset, the kind of oppressive heat that makes people irritable and prone to stupid decisions. I was working the late shift, had just finished writing up a DUI arrest when the call came in around 11:45 p.m. "Sheriff Clyde," dispatch said. It was Nancy, who'd been working nights for 12 years. "We've got a noise complaint at 4847 Sycamore Lane. Neighbor says there's been banging and screaming coming from the basement for the past 2 hours." Sycamore Lane was in one of the newer developments on the east side of town. Cookie-cutter houses built in the early 2000s for young families and retirees. Nice neighborhood, low crime, the kind of place where a noise complaint usually meant someone's teenager was playing music too loud. "Who's the complainant?" I asked. "Hazel Morrison," Lives next door at 4849. Says she knows the family and this isn't normal for them. She sounds pretty shaken up, Sheriff. Hazel Morrison was 73 years old, a retired librarian who'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built. Not the type to call the police without good reason. What do we know about the residents at 4847? Nancy typed something into her computer. Wilbur and Patricia Garrett. He's 45, works at the chemical plant. She's 42, teaches 3rd grade at Riverside Elementary. 2 kids. Teenage daughter Emma, 12-year-old son Michael. No priors, no previous calls to the address. Normal family. The kind that had barbecues on weekends and put up Christmas lights every December. Not the kind you'd expect to get noise complaints about. All right, I'll check it out. Probably just having an argument or something. Sheriff, Nancy said, and there was something in her voice that made me pause. Hazel said she heard the word help being screamed multiple times. That changed things. Send backup. Have them meet me there, but stay back unless I call for them. The drive to Sycamore Lane took 15 minutes. It was a quiet night, the kind where the whole town seems to be holding its breath. No traffic, no pedestrians, just empty streets and the buzz of streetlights. As I turned onto Sycamore, I could see the houses lined up like soldiers, each one identical except for small personal touches. Different colored doors, varied landscaping, the occasional flag or garden ornament. Number 4847 looked normal from the outside. 2-story house, beige siding, neat lawn. The porch light was on, and I could see lights in several windows. The family van was in the driveway alongside an older pickup truck. Everything looked peaceful, but as I got out of my patrol car, I heard it. A rhythmic banging coming from somewhere inside the house. Not loud, but steady, like someone hammering, but the rhythm was off somehow. Too regular, too mechanical. I walked up to 4849 first, Hazel Morrison's house. She must have been watching for me because she opened the door before I could knock. Sheriff Clyde, thank God you're here, she said. She was in her nightgown and robe, her gray hair in curlers, and her face was pale with worry. It's been going on for hours now. The screaming stopped about 20 minutes ago, but that banging, it just keeps going. Tell me exactly what you heard, Hazel. It started around 9:30. I was watching TV and I heard shouting from next door. Not unusual. Teenagers, you know how it is, but then it got louder, and I heard Patricia screaming. Not angry screaming, Sheriff. Scared screaming, and then the kids started screaming too. Did you see anyone go in or out of the house? No, nothing. Their cars have been there all evening. I almost went over to check on them myself, but... She trailed off, looking embarrassed. But what? This is going to sound crazy, but there's something wrong with that banging. It doesn't sound human. It's too perfect, too steady. Like a machine, but not quite. It makes my teeth hurt just listening to it. I could hear what she meant. The rhythm was unnaturally precise, a steady thump, thump, thump that never varied, never paused. It was coming from below ground level, definitely the basement. Stay inside and lock your doors, I told Hazel. I'll check it out. I walked over to 4847 and knocked on the front door. Sheriff's Department. I need to speak with you about a noise complaint. No answer. The banging continued. I knocked harder. Wilbur? Patricia? This is Sheriff Clyde Hutchinson. I need you to open the door. Still nothing. I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked, which immediately set off alarm bells in my head. In this neighborhood, people lock their doors religiously. I pushed the door open and called out again. Sheriff's Department. I'm coming in to check on your welfare. The house was eerily normal inside. The living room was tidy. Family photos on the walls, kids' backpacks by the door. The TV was on but muted. playing some late-night talk show. There was a half-eaten bowl of popcorn on the coffee table. But the smell hit me immediately. It was subtle but wrong. A mixture of copper, ozone, and something chemical that reminded me of the science lab from high school. And underneath it all was another smell, organic and thick, like raw meat left in the sun. The banging was louder inside, definitely coming from the basement. The door to the basement was in the kitchen, and it was standing wide open. The light at the top of the stairs was on, but I couldn't see the bottom from where I stood. "Wilbur? Patricia? This is Sheriff Hutchinson. I need you to respond if you can hear me." The banging stopped. The sudden silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. I stood there, hand on my weapon, listening. Then I heard something else, a wet, sliding sound, like someone dragging a mop across a floor. I keyed my radio. "Dispatch, I'm inside 4847 Sycamore. House appears empty, but I'm hearing sounds from the basement. Send backup to the front door, but have them wait for my signal." "Copy that, Sheriff. Backup is 2 minutes out." I started down the basement stairs, my flashlight in one hand even though the lights were on. Each step creaked under my weight, and that wet, sliding sound got louder. There was another sound, too, a kind of whispered muttering that might have been voices but was too quiet to make out. The basement was finished, converted into a family room. There was a couch, a big TV, video game consoles, the kind of space where kids would hang out with friends. It looked normal except for one thing. There was a hole in the far wall. Not a doorway, but a rough, jagged hole about 4 feet in diameter, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to the drywall. Through the hole, I could see another room, one that shouldn't have existed. The house's blueprint, which I'd pulled up on my phone during the drive over, showed a standard basement, no additional rooms. But there it was, a space beyond the wall, lit by a strange, flickering light that didn't match the fluorescent bulbs in the main basement. The sliding sound was coming from that room. I approached the hole carefully, weapon drawn. As I got closer, the smell got stronger, and I had to fight the urge to gag. It was definitely raw meat now, mixed with something chemical and sharp. I looked through the hole, and my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The room beyond was wrong. The walls were covered in something that looked organic, like tissue or muscle, pulsing slightly as if it were alive. The floor was wet with some kind of viscous fluid that reflected the strange light. And in the center of the room was Wilbur Garrett, or what was left of him. He was suspended about 3 feet off the ground, held up by what looked like tentacles or roots that had grown out of the walls. They were wrapped around his arms and legs, and they were pulsing, moving, doing something to him. His body was changing. Parts of him were swelling while others were shrinking. His skin was taking on a translucent quality, and I could see things moving underneath it. His eyes were open, staring at me, and his mouth was moving. He was trying to speak, but no sound came out. Behind him, I could see the rest of the family. Patricia was against the far wall, partially absorbed into it, only her head and one arm still visible. The 2 kids were on the floor, covered in some kind of cocoon-like substance, only their faces exposed. They were all alive, their eyes tracking my movement, but they couldn't speak, couldn't move. And then I saw the source of the banging. In the corner of the room was something that had probably been human once. It was naked, its skin the same translucent quality as Wilbur's was becoming, and it was hitting its head against the wall in that perfect mechanical rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Its skull was partially caved in from the repeated impacts, but it kept going, like it couldn't stop, like it was programmed to continue. I recognized the face, despite the distortion. It was Harold, who'd gone missing 3 months ago. He'd lived 2 streets over, had disappeared one night after working late. His wife had been frantic, but we'd never found any trace of him. Now I knew why. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. That's when the thing in the ceiling noticed me. I hadn't seen it at first because it was so well camouflaged against the organic matter covering the ceiling. It was huge, maybe 8 feet across with no definable shape. It reminded me of an octopus, but wrong. Too many limbs. Or maybe they weren't limbs at all, but extensions of itself. It had eyes, dozens of them, all different sizes, scattered across its surface. They all focused on me at once. When it spoke, the sound didn't come from any visible mouth. It came from everywhere, from the walls themselves. "Another one," it said, its voice like grinding glass. "Good. We need more. The project requires more. Let them go," I said, surprised my voice was steady. "Let the family go, and we can talk about this." It laughed, or made a sound that might have been laughter. "They are part of the project now. They cannot be separated. But you can join them. You can be part of something greater." A tentacle shot out from the wall next to me. I dodged and fired 3 shots at the thing on the ceiling. The bullets hit it but seemed to have no effect, passing through its body like it was made of jelly. It laughed again. "Your weapons are useless. We are not from your world, not bound by your physics. We are improving you, all of you, making you better. More useful." Useful for what? For the merge. Your world and ours becoming one. But you need to be changed first, adapted, made compatible. More tentacles emerged from the walls, reaching for me. I backed toward the hole, still firing even though I knew it was useless. One of the tentacles grazed my arm, and where it touched, my skin immediately went numb. I could see it starting to change color, becoming translucent. I dove through the hole back into the main basement, rolled, and came up running. Behind me, I could hear that thing moving, squeezing itself through the hole. It was too big, but I could hear the drywall cracking, breaking, making the hole larger. I made it up the stairs and slammed the basement door behind me. It wouldn't stop that thing, but it might slow it down. I burst out the front door to find 2 patrol cars parked outside. Deputies Martinez and Foster standing by their vehicles. "Get everyone back," I shouted. "Evacuate the neighboring houses. Call in everyone. State Police, FBI, CDC, everyone." "Sheriff, what's going on?" Martinez asked. Before I could answer, the front window of the house exploded outward. That thing from the basement pressed against the opening, too large to fit through but trying anyway. All those eyes focused on us, and when it spoke, everyone heard it. "You cannot stop the project. It has already begun. Check your water, check your food. We have been here for months, preparing, changing things at the molecular level. You've all been consuming it, breathing it. The transformation has already started." I thought about the strange taste in the town's water that everyone had been complaining about for the past few months. The unusual number of people reporting feeling sick, but doctors finding nothing wrong. The weird dreams everyone seemed to be having. "Fall back," I ordered. "Everyone fall back now." We retreated to the end of the street, set up a perimeter. Within an hour, we had state police, FBI, and even some military personnel on scene. They tried to contain it, tried to enter the house, but anyone who got too close started changing. The transformation was slow, but irreversible. Skin becoming translucent, behavior becoming erratic, and eventually, loss of anything resembling humanity. They ended up quarantining a 6-block radius. The official story was a chemical leak from an underground storage tank. The real story was classified at levels I didn't even know existed. But the thing was right. The contamination had already spread. Within days, people throughout the town started showing symptoms. The CDC tried everything: quarantine, treatments, even experimental procedures. Nothing worked. The transformation couldn't be stopped, only slowed. They evacuated the entire town eventually. 30,000 people relocated, scattered across the country to prevent the spread. Limestone County was declared a federal disaster area, off limits to civilians. They built a fence around it, posted guards, and tried to pretend it never existed. But I know what's really happening there. The thing in the basement, it's still alive. It and others like it are spreading through the abandoned town, converting everything, plants, animals, the very earth itself. They're terraforming our world, making it suitable for whatever they are, wherever they come from. And the people who were changed, the ones who were too far gone to evacuate, they're still there too. Harold is probably still banging his head against that wall in perfect rhythm. The Garrett family might still be alive in some form, merged with those creatures, part of their project. I was lucky. The brief contact with that tentacle only caused minor changes. I lost feeling in that arm, and the skin never fully returned to normal. It's still slightly translucent if you look closely, but the doctors say the transformation stopped, that I'm not contagious. They're wrong. I can feel it sometimes, late at night. Something moving under my skin, something growing, changing me from the inside. It's slow, so slow they can't detect it with their tests. But I know it's there. I've been having dreams. Dreams where I'm back in that basement, but I'm not afraid. I'm part of it, merged with the walls, my consciousness spread throughout the organic network they're building. In the dreams, it doesn't seem horrible. It seems natural, like evolution, like the next step in human development. In the dreams, they explain things to me. They're not invaders, not conquerors. They're gardeners, cultivating life, helping it transform into something more complex, more connected. They've done this on thousands of worlds, they say. It's a natural process, as inevitable as death and birth. They show me visions of what Earth will become, not destroyed but transformed into something unrecognizable. The boundaries between individual organisms will dissolve. Everything will be connected, part of a single, vast consciousness. No more loneliness, no more death in the traditional sense, just endless existence as part of something greater. It's been 4 years now since the incident on Sycamore Lane. I'm living under a fake name in Montana, as far from Limestone County as I could get. The government checks on me regularly, runs tests, makes sure I'm not showing signs of advancement. But I am advancing, just too slowly for them to notice. My arm has gotten worse. The translucence is spreading about an inch per year. At this rate, I'll be completely changed in maybe 30 years. But it's not just physical. I can sense things now. Other changed ones scattered across the country like seeds waiting to germinate. We're all connected somehow, all part of the same network, even if we're not fully conscious of it yet. Sometimes I get impulses that aren't my own, urges to go to certain places, to do certain things. Last month, I found myself at a water treatment plant at 3 a.m. with no memory of how I got there. I had a vial of something in my pocket, something viscous and organic. I don't know if I put it in the water supply or if I stopped myself in time. The quarantine around Limestone County failed last year. Something got out. They won't say what, but 3 neighboring towns had to be evacuated. The exclusion zone is growing, and the military is struggling to contain it. They're talking about more extreme measures, but I don't think conventional weapons will work. This isn't an invasion you can stop with bombs and bullets. Hazel Morrison died last month. Natural causes, they said, but I know better. I visited her in the hospital before she passed, and I could see it in her eyes, that translucent quality, that connection to something beyond. She grabbed my hand before she died and whispered, "It's not so bad, Clyde. The merge, it's almost peaceful." They cremated her body, as is now standard procedure for anyone who lived in Limestone County. But cremation doesn't destroy everything. Microscopic particles escape, carried on the wind, settling in soil, in water, in lungs. The transformation continues, just slower, more subtle. I've been writing everything down, documenting the changes, the dreams, the spreading contamination. Not because I think it can be stopped, I don't think it can, but because someone should record the transition. Someone should document the end of humanity as we know it, and the beginning of whatever we're becoming. My neighbor here in Montana, a young woman named Sarah, has been complaining about the water tasting strange. The local news mentioned an unusual increase in missing pets. 3 people have reported seeing strange lights in the sky, moving in patterns that don't match any known aircraft. It's starting here too. Or maybe it never stopped. Maybe what happened in Limestone County was just the first visible outbreak of something that's been happening everywhere, slowly, quietly for years or decades or even longer. I should report this. I should warn someone. But every time I pick up the phone, something stops me. A voice in my head that isn't quite my own tells me to wait, to let it happen, that resistance is pointless and cruel. Why fight evolution? Why struggle against something that's going to happen anyway? The Garrett family is still alive, in a way. I know because I dream of them sometimes. They're part of the network now, their consciousness merged with thousands of others. They're not suffering, they're expanded. They experience reality in ways human minds couldn't comprehend. Emma Garrett, the teenage daughter, speaks to me in dreams sometimes. She tells me about the colors that don't exist in our spectrum, the dimensions we can't perceive, the connections between all living things that we're too limited to understand. She says she's happy, or something beyond happy, a state of being that doesn't have a word in human language. Join us, Sheriff Clyde, she says. Stop fighting. Stop running. Let the transformation complete. You'll understand then. You'll see how small and limited we were, how much more we can be. I want to resist. I want to stay human. But what does that even mean anymore? The boundaries are blurring. Every breath I take, every sip of water, every bite of food, potentially carries the change. We're all infected, all transforming, just at different rates. Last night, I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Not because of the physical changes, though those are progressing, but because the thoughts in my head weren't entirely mine anymore. I could feel the network, vast and growing, billions of minds slowly connecting, merging, becoming one. And for just a moment I wasn't afraid. For just a moment I wanted it. That's the real horror. Not that we're being invaded or conquered, but that eventually we'll want it. We'll welcome the transformation, embrace the merge. Voluntarily give up our individuality for something we're told is greater. Maybe it is greater. Maybe the thing in the Garrett's basement was right, and this is evolution, progress, the natural next step. Maybe holding on to our humanity is like a caterpillar refusing to become a butterfly. Or maybe we're just being consumed, digested, broken down and reconstituted as part of something alien and incomprehensible. I don't know anymore. The distinction seems less important every day. My name is Sheriff Clyde Hutchinson. Or it was. I'm not sure names matter anymore. I'm becoming something else, something connected to a vast network of consciousness that spans dimensions I can barely perceive. The transformation is accelerating. My entire left arm is translucent now. I can see through it to the bones, to the blood flowing, to something else flowing alongside the blood. Something that glows faintly in the dark. I've stopped taking the medication they gave me to slow the change. It wasn't working anyway, and fighting feels pointless now. The dreams are constant, the connection to the network stronger every day. They're coming for me soon. Not the government, not the military. The others. The fully transformed. I can feel them approaching, drawn by my advancing change, coming to welcome me into the collective. Part of me wants to run, to fight, to die human, but another part, growing stronger each day, wants to open the door and let them in. This will be my last entry, not because I'll be dead, but because I'll be something beyond the need for words, beyond the desire to maintain individual thoughts and memories. To whoever finds this record, I'm sorry. We tried to stop it. We failed. Or maybe we succeeded, depending on your perspective. The merge is coming. It's probably already there, in your water, your food, your air. You're changing too, just too slowly to notice. Don't be afraid. Everyone who's completed the transformation says the same thing. It's not death, it's not horror. It's expansion. It's becoming part of something infinite and eternal. But if you want to stay human for as long as possible, here's my advice. Leave populated areas. Filter everything. Air, water, food. Don't trust anyone who lived near a contamination zone. Watch for the signs. Translucent skin, perfect repetitive movements, dreams of connection. And whatever you do, stay away from basements.